family. Glad to be back with you. Let me check and make sure everything's working as it's supposed to. Hope you've been having a fantastic week. Oh God. Oh God. No, not that. All right. Make sure there's some sound. And it is. Let me check Facebox. You know what? I'll be right back. I'm gonna stop this app, so hopefully we won't have drop scenes. You know what I'm talking about? We've been having a problem with that the last couple of weeks, but since I've been closing the app, I've been pretty good. So give me 1 second, family. I shall be right back. Appreciate your patience. All right, we're gonna get this party started. Again, glad to be with you. Hope you've been having a fantastic week. I was listening to some Action Bronson before the show, and that Latin Grammy song is stuck in my head. But we are continuing. Are we on the throat? Yes. So we are on our throat chakra. I think I want to do 444 again. I've been enjoying that. The family has too. Excuse me. Hold on. Yeah, so the family has been enjoying that as well. Do our visualization. Then we're gonna jump into reading. I got the rain stick out today too. I don't know. So I was feeling. We're gonna start with our big bowl. Hello, Liberty. interesting concept, but I appreciate that. You should join on Tuesdays too. We're generally talking about healing and stuff like that, and I do live energy readings. The Soul family would appreciate you. All right, I am going to hit the rain stick for a little bit. I brought it up. All right, let's get into our breathing exercise. We're going to do 4-4-4. If you don't recall, it is you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, and you release for 4. I'll keep count so you can focus on your breathing. And make sure we good. On my count of 3. We do it 3 times. I think that's good. So on my count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold 4. 2, 3, 4. Release 4. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. Last time. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. So we are on our throat chakra. The color for that is light blue. The element is ether. So we are going to shape some energy. Imagine in your hands you have a energy, a word that describes something you need, whether it be love, whether it be forgiveness, patience, understanding. Appreciate you again for the 1K. Much love, plenty of gratitude. Um, and in that hand, you think about, you know, I think my word today would be water. So I was on my rain stick. Water has its cleansing properties. So I would use water to shape within my hand. In your hands, you begin to shape that energy, that love, that cleansing, that water, that fire. And as you shape that energy, you feel it combine with your spirit, giving you the energy you need. You feel it go through your palms of your hands, up your forearms to your shoulders, across to your heart, up to the top of your head, and it travels down past your stomach, all the way to the tips of your toes. And as this energy fills you, you feel release. You can taste freedom. You have the understanding and the courage to be able to communicate authentically and honestly in a way that feels good to you. And as you enjoy this energy, I want you to repeat these affirmations after me. I speak and hear truth. I communicate honestly. I live an authentic life. I am fearless and free. I trust what I have to say. I speak and hear truth. I communicate honestly. I live an authentic life. I am fearless and free. I trust what I have to say. All right, family, we're gonna get back in to this book. I hadn't read it in a couple of weeks, so we was in Jacksonville last week, and I was too tired out. Well, I was definitely tired and being lazy. A busy week. Even though I enjoyed Jacksonville, I did have a good time. I told you this grilled cheese sandwich I went crazy over. I went and got that a couple of times. The weather was fantastic, so I cannot complain. Even though when I went, it was a little cloudy. I was thankful by the time we got there. We got sunshine. We were close to the water, so we always had a nice little breeze. It was, oh man, I didn't have to worry about the pollen. You know how everything here is green. Even when it rained, the mud in the street is green. But there, I did not have that problem, so it was fantastic. All right. Early in the school year, the Student Government Association voted to have student body select a homecoming king along with the traditional homecoming queen. Liz and I were among these nominated for the competition, which was nothing but a popularity contest. The winners were announced during the halftime ceremonies at the school homecoming football game. The night of the game, I fell into the football stadium looking like Superfly in the flesh. I wore a long blue crushed velvet maxi overcoat, a white turtleneck, and a matching white stingy brim Kango hat, white shoes, and blue and white elephant leg pants. I carried a wine flask over my shoulder, and although it was dark outside, I sported sunshades. I smoked reefer and drunk wine at Shell Shock's house before the game, and I was flying high as a kite by the time I reached Churchland Stadium. If Barnum and Balin had seen me that night, they would have kidnapped me for their circus. During halftime, the nominees for various student offices were ushered onto the football field. The stadium was packed, but when the announcer began speaking over the public address system, A weird hush fell over the crowd. Then the speaker announced the runners up of different categories. Finally, he got around to the main competition, homecoming king and queen. I closed my eyes and I heard him say, and the winner for Mr. Manor is Nathan McCall. By then, I was so high that I could barely stand up straight and keep my eyes open. I stumbled forward and nodded, and the students in the crowded bleachers cheered wildly and applauded. When Liz's name was called, she stepped forward and stood beside me, and someone handed her a bouquet of roses. We were crowned Mr. and Miss Manor. We stood there, side by side, beaming brightly at each other. It was this perfect fantasy come true. Nathan McCall, Elizabeth Miller, Mr. and Miss Manor. It was the first time since the days of the spelling bee competition that I had been recognized for anything constructive in school. Less than a month later, the fairy tale fizzled. Liz came to see me one day and said, I'm pregnant. The meaning of what she said didn't immediately sink in. At first, I assumed she was pregnant by her old boyfriend, but then I realized that he was away and that she hadn't been with him in a while. It was a wonder that I was surprised. All those years of throwing down in bed with girls, I never took precaution. For the longest time, I thought the only way a woman could get pregnant was if she had a guy and if she and a guy had an orgasm at the same time. Now I learned the hard way that wasn't true. At age 17, I had a crumb snatcher on the way. Shell Shock had gotten a girl pregnant the year before, and during high school, I'd had three other girls tell me they were expecting babies about me. One eventually admitted someone else was the father. I ignored the other two. They were quick hits. Crosstown girls I'd assumed were sexually active as I was and who had done a coin toss to come up with a father. But with Liz, I willingly owned up to my responsibility. I told her I'll do what I have to do to help out. But I had no idea what that meant. Welcome back, Liberty. Why don't you go over to Twitch? I spent those last few months before graduation in a deep fog. Time was blurred. The graduation calendar was a reminder that my 16th date was nearing, that sooner or later I would be shoved into a hostile world to sink or swim. I could see that the other students, those who were preparing for college, seemed to have confidence and direction. So I decided, almost without thinking, that I'd go to college too. I could hide out there for a while, then figure out what I really wanted to do. With time running out, I applied to three colleges: Norfolk State, Virginia State, and Howard University. Nobody in our family had gone to college but Billy, who had dropped out and moved away. On commencement day, my parents sat proudly in the bleachers of the high school auditorium. I glanced up at them, smiled weakly, then turned away. My mother had notified all of our relatives in North Carolina and New York and had even told the minister of the family church, the Reverend Miss Ramsall, had me come to Sunday service to receive a special graduation gift. It was a blue Bible with my name inscribed in gold letters on its cover. Sitting in that auditorium, I felt deeply depressed. I couldn't see why I'd be any better off with a diploma than the guys who had just joined the military or gone to work at the shipyard. Dressed in my cap and gown, I sat there in a trance as one speaker after another talked glowingly about the challenges and bright futures we face. During the ceremony, the principal singled out for special recognition the academic achievers who had received noteworthy college scholarships. I'll never forget that one guy, a tall, black, goofy dude, had gotten a $50,000 scholarship to study science at a major university. It seemed that the guys who get the biggest scholarships were the very ones the fellas and I had considered lames throughout school. They were the ones we made fun of and harassed. They'd sacrificed popularity to do their work. Now this was their day. Watching them walk proudly to the stage, I wondered why they had gotten so much out of school and I had not. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I struggled hard to hold them back as I watched friends walk forward to get their diplomas. Liz, with a long gown bulging, bounced happily down the aisle. I saw Shell Shock, Shane, Chip, Cooter, and a few others who, along with me, were among the elites from our gang who made it through school. Oh, okay, I understand. Well, you might have some points then. I'm gonna have to check before I log on to see if you got some points so you can test out the gambling. But you are correct. It does not do the hearts the same. When my name was called, the walk down the aisle seemed like a death march. I walked up onto the stage, took my diploma, shook the principal's hand without looking at him, turned around, put on a brave face, and walked back to my seat. The carefree days are officially over. We launched into a theme song chosen for our graduation class. It didn't help my mood. It was, "We've only just begun." After graduation, everybody gathered in the main auditorium for a reception. People were hugging and crying and taking pictures with family and friends. Shell Shock, seeing me leaning quietly against the wall, came over and asked, "What's the matter with you, stick man? Why you ain't celebrating with everybody else?" I snapped, "What's there to celebrate? A diploma ain't nothing but a piece of paper." Shell Shock nodded. "I know, it ain't shit." Unlike me, he didn't seem worried. He had a game plan. He had his superfly dreams. I had a pregnant girlfriend and the promise of a life in a white man's world with the hard way to go. A group of students had made plans to meet later that night and hold our own celebration at some beach. Driving my stepfather's car with Liz and a few of other friends, I spent half the night riding around, trying to find a place. The outcome of the evening was a fitting symbol of things to come. We got lost and never got there. Chapter 14, Falling. Liz went into labor July 19th, 1973. I was doing yard work when the call came in from my mother. I dropped what I was doing and left for the hospital. It was one of those cloudy experiences where I went through the emotions, feeling numb inside. When I reached the waiting room, Liz's mother was sitting there alone reading the newspaper. I said hi and I took a seat. She said hi and returned to her reading. In the hours we waited for the delivery, she was cordial but said no more than what was required. A big boned, gray haired woman in her 50s. She was weary of me. She viewed me as an irresponsible thug and wondered what Liz saw in me. Determined about a no one, I was just as cool towards her as she was towards me. I picked up the magazines and flipped nervously through the pages. We sat there quietly, two strangers bound together by a new life. Liz delivered a boy just after midnight. They named him Monroe after his paternal grandfather. I had little say in the matter since I hadn't donated time and money to help Liz through the pregnancy. I was unemployed with no prospect of finding a job. Liz's mother's military benefits covered the hospital costs. When the nurses brought Monroe out, he looked like a red, wrinkly 70-year-old rubber doll. Although I smiled and held him, I felt no real connection to that young life. I didn't feel the joy I thought fathers were supposed to feel. If anything, I felt fear. I was out to guide a new life when I couldn't even direct my own. What could one child do for another child? After Monroe was taken back to the infants ward, I really felt weird. On TV, whenever somebody had a baby, friends and families passed out cigars and slapped the father heartily on the back and congratulated him. But there was no one there but Liz's mother and me. I felt empty. Liz, who was wheeled back to a recovery room, must have felt the same way. She was 18, recently graduated, and stuck with a newborn with a boyfriend who she might or might not be able to rely on down the stretch. Hmm. One day during the summer my son was born, I came home from a job hunting and found a letter at the service notifying me that I would need to register for the draft. Although Junie, Dwight, and half my friends had gone into the military, I knew it wasn't for me. I had hated it ever since Muhammad Ali got screwed over for being a conscientious objector. When he made the statement, "Ain't no Vietnamese ever called me N word," he captured exactly what I felt. I thought the nerve of them motherfuckers expecting me to fight for them while they mistreat black folks in this country. I tore the leather up into 1,000 pieces and threw that shit in the trash. To this day, I couldn't tell you my selective service classification. I ain't look at it. I didn't care. In fact, I cared so little that I didn't mention the letter to my parents or anybody else. I just threw it away and never heard a peep from Uncle Sam. My life by then was getting very complicated. Shell shocked and I had cut back on our stick ups after we began dealing drugs full time, but I was still in the life. I become a father, and shortly after Monroe was born, I got accepted to all three colleges that I'd applied to. I wanted badly to go to Howard University to break from Portsmouth and try to make a new start, but my parents couldn't afford it. Anyway, it seemed selfish to go away to school and leave Liz to care for the baby alone. I felt there was no choice but to enroll locally at Norfolk State. Norfolk State was and still is one of those historically black colleges that would let anybody in. They call it open admissions. That means that if you can write your name and read Cat in the Hat, you're in like Flynn. So I was in. I signed up to study psychology. In the 1970s, everybody majored with something in the social sciences, especially psychology, sociology, and social work. I had no real interest in psychology. I picked that major because it sounded hip. I bopped into this philosophy class a week late with dark sunshades on, a hat on backwards, pants hung low, and slumped down into a seat in the back of the room. The professor, a tall, heavyset dude, the Reverend Elward Ellis, was lecturing, ignoring me. He kept his eyes on the other students and threw out a zinger without missing a beat. Some of the best philosophers in the world hang on street corners, he said. Boom. He got my attention then. I immediately sat up straight in my seat. I knew he knew something. I knew he had to have something under his cap to make that statement. From then on, he was all right with me. I had somebody I could talk to. Reverend Ellis supervised the campus ministry and often invited students to his house for dinner and discussions about spiritual things and life in general. Apparently, sensing that I had a lot of heavy stuff going on in my head, he invited me there alone a few times to talk and encouraged me to open up. During one of the visits, he gave me a book entitled As a Man Thinketh. I took the book home and forgot about it. Ellis wasn't the only one to reach out to me that year. There was an English teacher who took a liking to me. An even man from my neighborhood extended his hand. His name was Hugh Jones. He used to chase the fellas and me all the time when we were young. We cut through his backyard, cussing and carry on our way to Bimbo's house, and he'd come out mad as hell and try to run us down. Mr. Jones has had nieces at Norfolk State. I ran into him at a candlelight service for incoming freshmen. He acted so shocked and happy to see me on the college campus that I thought he was going to kiss me right there in front of everybody. "I ain't know if you finished high school," he said. "I saw you hanging on the corner so much I figured you had dropped out. Now you are here in college. I wanted you to know how proud I am of you, and I'll do anything I can to help you. You know where I live. Stop by my house and talk sometime." He patted me on the back and left. Before then, I thought he was just another tight butt old head in the neighborhood who didn't want anybody to have fun. Then I went by his place and chat, and I saw a different side of him. I saw that he was a deep cat who cared a lot about black people, especially young black people. It made me feel kind of good knowing there were people like Reverend Ellis and Mr. Jones pulling for me. The combination of all those people offering encouragement inspired me to apply myself that first year. I finished as a freshman with a 3.0 grade average, the first time I had made honor roll since junior high school. Still, all those folks who tried to help me weren't enough to bring me around. I was too steeped in a life to be easily turned around by a starch collar clergic and a couple of do-gooders. Besides, my head just wasn't in the right place to take advantage of all they had to offer. There were too many things eating me. Some of it was just plain immaturity, like ego tripping. In high school, I was the shit, Mr. Popularity. But in college, I was suddenly a small fish in a very big bowl. Everybody at Norfolk State looked so together, especially the cats coming out the military. They went to college on the GI Bill and used their monthly allotment checks to get apartments and buy nice cars and fine clothes. My class full had dried up. I stayed broke all the time. So there I was in college, an unemployed nobody, dressing in last year's rag, depending on my parents' funds. It didn't take long for me to get discouraged. Beyond all that, I didn't feel I fitted in. The college crowd with their fraternities and sororities was a different type of crowd than I was used to. I couldn't get into those folks, and they were there to administrate, and they were there what? And then there were the administrative hassles, excuse me, from registration with long lines and runarounds to choosing classes with whole process seemed like a continuous headache. After my first year, my motivation dropped. I go to some of my classes high, tripping off acid, then I get paranoid and walk out in the middle of the lecture. I didn't even bother to go to class half the time. With nobody to tell me what to do and where to go, I wandered aimlessly about campus and spent a lot of time gambling on the pool table and in the card games in the student union building. I lost interest in college. Soon, I was back on the streets. In the summer of 1974, Liz came up to me and said she had a run in with Plaz. She and a girlfriend were riding bikes past 7-Eleven when Plaz, hanging around with some other guys, called her a name. He called me a white girl, so I gave him a middle finger. She said, that was bad news. Plaz and I had a history went back several years when he and those other cats barged in on Denise Wilson and me and raped her. I never got any big back, but I never forgot it either. I hated Plaz for that. If I thought I had half a chance of kicking his ass, I probably would have moved in on him a long time before the run in with Liz. But I was in no hurry to lock horns with Plaz, excuse me. He hung with Scooby D. I was 19 and he was 22, a much harder cat than me. But he cracked hard on my lady. He disrespected me. Something had to give. One night, shortly after Liz running with Plaz, she and I took Monroe to the carnival near Cavalier Manor. We were walking along, pushing him in a stroller, when Plaz and three of his boys walked up and confronted us, his eyes blazing. Plaz got within an inch of Liz's face, shook his finger at her, and said, the next time you flash your middle finger at me, I'm going to break it off. You hear me? Then he scowled at me, looked me up and down as if daring me to say something, and turned to walk away. I just stood there thinking, this nigga gonna make me do something I ain't come here to do. Not only had he disrespected me again, but he done it in front of my lady. I had to do something. That's when I decided to shoot him. I told Liz, take the baby, put him in the car, and you two go on home. She got scared. Where are you going? I'm gonna fuck that up. She pleaded, come on, Nate. We don't have to pay attention to him. I didn't look at her. Go home. Liz turned and hurriedly pushed the stroller away. As I walked in the direction of Plaz and his boys had headed, I steeled my nerves. Whenever I wanted to do something really crazy like that, something I didn't have the natural heart to do, I had to run a head game on myself. I had to shut down my mind. I had to block out all thoughts flowing through my brain to prevent them from talking me out myself. Talking me out of it. That's the only way I'd be able to get through with it. That's what I did that night. I decided to shoot Plaz, and I didn't want to change my mind. I couldn't allow that. I had a shoulder pouch that I carried with me. In it was some drugs and a 22 pistol. I spotted Plaz and his boys milling around, talking with some other dudes they'd run into. I walked over to the crowd and said to him, yo, man, I want to talk to you. Flanked by his boys, Plas really got loud then. He pointed his finger at me and said, "Nigga, you better get out my face before I stomp your ass. I'm tired of you and that B." While he talked, I kept my hand inside the pouch, gripping the trigger. Sensing that a rumble was about to jump off, people started crowding around. I saw my buddy Greg in the crowd looking nervously at Plas boys, counting heads. I knew he would go down with me if it came to that. Moving close enough for me to smell his breath, Plas poked a finger in my chest and kept selling wolf tickets. "I'll kick your ass." In one swift motion, I drew the gun, aimed point blank at his chest, and fired. Bam! Tiny red speck appeared on the dingy white t-shirt he wore. He fell backwards. His arms flew skyward and he dropped to the ground, landing on his back. As soon as they heard the blast, his boys scattered. Everybody around us ran for cover. I walked towards Plas, looked him in his eyes, and saw something I had never seen him before. Gone was the fierceness that made him intimidating all those years. In his place was shock and fear. It was more like terror. In that moment, I felt like God. I felt so good and powerful that I wanted to do it again. I felt like I could pull the trigger and keep on pulling until I emptied the gun. Years later, I read an article in Psychology magazine that likening the feeling of shooting a gun to ejaculation. That's what it was like for me, shooting off. I stepped closer and raised the gun to shoot Plas again when Greg came up from behind me and called my name. "No, yet, no, Nate, you don't want to do that, man." He carefully pulled the gun from my hand. The distraction gave Plas enough time to collect himself. Holding a hand to his bleeding chest, he jumped from the ground and dashed toward the parking lot and collapsed between two cars. The carnival grounds, meanwhile, had turned chaotic. People ran, screaming everywhere. It was like one of those movies where a monster was trampled through a city and everybody's running, hollering, fleeing for their lives. It made me feel powerful and lightheaded, seeing hundreds of people scattering because of something I had done. I felt like Scooby Doo. Only I was confused about what to do next. I didn't know whether to beat my chest and yell at the top of my voice or shout some pithy John Wayne-esque remark to be quoted when the shooting was recounted in the streets. I yelled to no one particular. "I hope that motherfucker dies." A security guard had been standing nearby when I first approached Plas. I half expected him to walk over and arrest me. I waited for a moment for him to come up and slap the handcuffs, but the guard, apparently rattled by all the commotion, also scrambled for cover. Greg asked me, "You got a ride?" I said, "Nah." He said, "Come on." We hopped in his car and drove off. When we got out the main street, he said, "Where you want to go?" I realized that I hadn't thought about that. Where do you go after you shot somebody? In all the stories I heard about Scooby and his boys, it was never clear what they did after they shot or maimed someone. There was nowhere else to go but home. I said, "Take me to the crib, man." Greg dropped me off and I went into the house. Walking down the hallway to my parents' bedroom, I met my stepfather coming towards me. I said, "I need to talk to you. I just shot somebody." He was calm. "Is he dead?" "I don't know." I thought for a moment and said, "Let me get dressed. We got to go to the police station." During the 20-minute ride to the station, neither of us spoke a word. The seriousness of what I had done was dawning on me. Who knows what my stepfather was thinking? After all the run-ins we'd had, he'd known I was headed for something like this. Yet he didn't try to preach to me, or say "I told you so." I actually felt glad to have him on my side. We went downtown and I turned myself in. I felt strange giving myself up voluntarily to the same people I dodged every day. After interviewing me about the shooting, a detective escorted my father and me into a hallway and told us to wait on the bench. Sitting there in the quiet, I felt so alone. There was no roaring crowd or group of running buddies to pat me on the back and sing my praises. It was just me, sitting there, suddenly powerless again, waiting to face the consequences. After an hour or so, the detective returned to the hallway. Looked at my stepfather and said, I'm sorry to keep you waiting out there so long, but Melvin Thompson, the guy your son shot, was rushed to the hospital. They're operating him. They don't think he's going to make it. If he dies, we're going to have to charge your son with murder. The word hit me like a sledgehammer. Murder? On TV westerns when people got shot, they just tied a handkerchief around their arm and went on about their business. Whenever Scoob shot somebody, they lived. Plaz wasn't supposed to die, I thought. Murder, if he dies, then that would mean I killed someone. Murder? I repeated the word silent to myself over and over, trying to grasp its full meaning. Then I got a sharp vision of who I really was. I realized I didn't want to be cold-blooded, a badass anymore. I wanted to erase the past few hours, to wipe the slate clean. In desperation, I bowed my head, closed my eyes tight, and prayed to God to spare Plaz's life. Please, God, don't let him die. Please. I prayed so hard that a listener would have thought Plaz was my dearly beloved brother. My stepfather remained quiet. I don't know if he noticed me praying. At the moment, it didn't matter. I was too busy trying to establish a personal relationship with my Lord and Savior. After several hours, the detective returned to the hallways. I've got some good news. Thompson pulled through. The doctor said a bullet barely missed his heart. Another fraction of an inch closer, and he would have been pushing up daisies. I thank sweet Jesus. Oddly, I was released on my own reconnaissance. I guess it was an indication of how they felt about the value of black life that I wasn't even required to post bond. When I woke up that afternoon, I checked the newspaper and read a brief story about the shooting. The gravity of what I've done thinking again, but this time I looked at it in an entirely different light. Now that I was certain Plaz would live, I felt hard again, and I thought about glory. I had toppled an old head. I got dressed, ate, and went outdoors to catch up with some of the fellas. While walking down Roosevelt Boulevard, I saw a car filled with a bunch of old hoods approach slowly. As it cruised closer, heads turned sharply and looked at me. It was some of Plaz's boys. The driver pulled over to the curb and everybody in the car glared. They started talking to each other, debating, I assumed, whether to jump out and do me in. Feigning confidence, I reached slowly in my pocket as though gripping a gun, then stood there and met their gaze. My heart pounded hard. I knew that if they got out that car, they stumped me 6 feet under, but no one budged. They talked some more, then the driver pulled away slowly from the curb and drove off. For that brief silent exchange was undeniable proof that I had arrived. I was bona fide crazy. Everywhere I went after that, guys on the street said reverently, yeah, man, I heard you busted Captain Plaz. My street rep shot up 3 full notches. Anybody out there who knew me would think twice about moving against me without a piece. Anybody. My parents got me one of the best criminal lawyers in Portsmouth. By the time I had went to court a few months later, he had worked out a deal with the Commonwealth's attorney for me to plead guilty to a lesser charge of felonious assault rather than face trial for attempted murder. I went before the judge and claimed that I shot in self-defense, and I got off like 30 days in jail for assault and a $300 fine for possession of a firearm and 1 year's probation. It helped that I enrolled in college. The judge was so impressed with my college grades that he agreed to allow me to do my jail time on 4 weekends, meaning I had only do 8 days instead of a full 30. I was thrilled. The first weekend in Portsmouth jail was the hardest. When I went in and placed in the cell, the time hit me. 24 hours takes on a whole new dimension behind bars. I struggled through each minute and suffered every creeping hour. By the following weekend and each week after, I came up with a better way to handle the time. About a half an hour before Liz dropped me off at jail, I dropped a hit of acid. It usually took me an hour or so for it to take effect. By then, I was inside a cell, riding high as a kite. I trip on the environment for a while, then doze off and fall asleep high. Whenever I was awake, I talked through the bars to the other guys and watched the black and white TV on the stand in the hallway. I left jail on Sunday afternoon, refreshed and ready to face life again. It's still crazy. Definitely a testimony of how quickly emotions can change life. And right. And I'm still tripping on how this dude just go to jail on weekends. This is definitely a different time. they, they not, they not giving you weekend sentences now. Jesus Christ, no. Yeah, dude only got 30 days. That's wild in itself. Like, bro, how you only get 30 days and $300 fine? That is wild. Sometime after the shooting, I saw Plaz on the street near the 7-Eleven. I wasn't armed. For a minute, I feared that he might try to get some get back, but he didn't. He didn't even look me in the eye. He didn't want me to try. He didn't want to try me again because he didn't know what I might do. That was the way I wanted it. The shooting calmed Plaz down only temporarily. A few years later, he shot and killed a guy at Cavalier Manor Recreation Field. The word on the street was that he did it because Scoob told him to. Plaz went away to prison for a long, long time. Chapter 15, Trap. One thing I learned, the mind is like the body. If you don't work actively to protect its health, you can lose it, especially if you're a black man, 19 years old and wondering, as I was, if you were born into the wrong world. The tricky thing about the mind is that when it's deeply troubled, it can shift tracks on you. It keeps working, you are thinking, but the mind shifts from logic to illogic without you being aware. Then one day you step outdoors butt naked, wearing your underwear on your head, thinking that you're fully dressed. It didn't get that bad for me, but things were falling apart in my head much faster than they were coming together. And I wasn't alone. I saw it happening to most of the fellas around me. Greg, Shane, Cooter, my older brother Dwight. We were bouncing around like pinballs in a machine, wondering if the world was fucked up or if we were, wondering why we were being pushed into the back seat of life and couldn't get at the wheel. If you were the only person riding the car and you're not driving, there shouldn't be nothing. There's nothing to do but crash. Although I got off light on the rap of Plaz, life got no easier to manage. The shooting, the trial, the time in jail were just a few series of troubles that began pouring in. Even the honeymoon with Liz began to dull. The responsibilities that came with parenthood were a bummer. I used to be able to jump up and do anything at any time. Then all of a sudden, it took 45 minutes to pack Pampers and bottles and extra baby clothes just to go on a lightweight outing to the park. Being a father seemed like such a huge hassle that I lacked both the will and desire to deal with it. So I started tripping out every now and then and hanging with chicks who had no children. I kept my role sometimes when Liz had to work, but I still couldn't get into the groove with that fatherhood thing. As the mother who carried the baby for 9 months, Liz had no problem connecting from the jump. But I was just too young and immature to extend that kind of love beyond myself. So I focused on practical matters that affected us all, namely money, which I never seemed to have. Compared to me, Shell Shock was Superfly. By the time we graduated, he bought a real gold tooth and paid cash for a deuce and a quarter Buick Electra 225. He put gangster white wall ties on his ride and cruised through Cavalier Manor, hawking drugs and supervising the guys who worked for him. One day I went with Shell Shock to a house where he copped his supply. The dude who owned the house was a Vietnam vet who lived in Cavalier Manor. We got there, sat down in the living room, took a few joints, and talked. When Shell Shock and the other dude went into the back room to transact business, I sat there tripping and gawking at the tough furniture and the slick layout of the place. He was a cat in his late 20s or early 30s, and he had everything: a nice crib, a fine ride, dynamite stereo system, a monthly allotment check coming from Uncle Sam, He had drug money flowing in too, and it appeared no hassles from the man. Sitting there, I realized I needed to get smart. I needed to make some money and get back into the flow of things. Liz and I combined our funds, a couple of $100s, and I bought a quarter pound of reefer. I broke it down into smaller bags to put out in the street. With that done, I set out to build clientele. I made the rounds and got word out. Folks cop from me. I quickly discovered that dealing wasn't as easy as it seemed. Selling roof was a round the clock hustle and required more time and energy than I wanted to invest. It does. Unloading a single OZ sometimes took up to an hour. Half the time, cats wanted to sample the stuff before they bought it, and even then, they'd haggle over the weight. Man, I can get more than this over on Henderson Street. I'd have to be firm. Well, go to Henderson Street and get it then. Selling reefer also required more restraint than I could muster. I often got bored waiting for people to cop and dipped into my own manila packets to smoke some here and there. Some nights I wound up getting so high that I didn't feel like selling anymore. Once I got high, I got the serious munchies and I couldn't concentrate on anything but food, music, and sex. I eventually built up a decent clientele, but discovered that too had its drawbacks. Guys wanting to score were always looking for me, pulling up the carload in front of my parents' house and calling at all hours of the day and night. Dudes always wanting to meet them in out of the way places to deliver the goods. I didn't have the advantage of beepers, phone recorders, and portable telephones like cats have today. I had it rough, worked the streets and stayed there most of the time. I had to hit all the hot corners and make sure I was accessible, especially on shipyard paydays and Mother's Day. The first of the month when sisters in the projects got their welfare checks. Most of the time I used Liz's car, a 1973 Buick Opal her mother gave her as a graduation gift. When I didn't have an Opal, I worked the streets on foot, trying to be high profile and at the same time avoid undercover narcs. Among the dealers, the competition was stiff. I tried to gain an edge by offering more weight than the next man, which cut down on my profits, unless I patted the reefer with a little oregano. I also tried to lure buyers by putting out the word that I had some exotic brand of reefer known for its potency. Yo, man, it's straight out of Mexico. This is monster herb. Or yo, blood, I got some sets from Jamaica that's out of sight. The problem was most of the reefer on the street at given time came from one source. I didn't learn until later that a lot of the top level dealers of New York and places control whole regions, meaning that all of us low level dealers were selling the same stuff. I also found out that I damn near had to be an accountant to stay in business. I had to save money. I made investments and managed properly so that I could reinvest. That didn't go well either. I was too lax with spending. Hanging out there in the street, I often got hungry and spent a lot of money on food and drink and lost track of who owed me money and squandered a lot of cash just having fun. Sometimes when the sales were good, Liz and I threw small parties at local hotels or packed up her car and left town for the weekend to run to Washington, a 4 hour drive away. Eventually, I realized it was too much work for me to try to hawk herb alone. Frog Dickey, who had returned home from Job Corps, was unemployed and down and out, so I put him to work. With him dealing for me, I had to keep track of how much dope I gave him to sell and how much money I was due. I often wrote it down and lost the notes when I got high. My problems dealing drugs didn't help my self esteem any. I saw guys like Shell Shock managing their money, supervising hard heads, and moving along, and I wondered what they knew about dealing that I ain't know. The bad thing about it was I was too proud to ask. The thing about drug dealing that bothered me most was that I had to be ruthless or act like I was. I had to be prepared to seriously hurt or kill a friend, family, or foe if the need arose. I found out I wasn't down for all that when Frog put me to the test. After taking prop After taking and probably smoking the stuff I gave him to sell, Frog dropped out of sight, which was sure sign that he'd messed up my money. When I finally caught up with him, He put on a sad face. Oh man, guess what happened? He told me. I was up at the 7-Eleven talking to some guys, and the lawman came down on us from nowhere. They chased us all through the path behind the store, and I had to ditch stuff in the bushes. I couldn't take a chance on getting busted, man. You know how that is. I looked at him long and hard. Hey man, you playing me for a chump or what? Nah, Nate, you know I wouldn't do that, man. That's really what happened. Ask some of the guys at the store. Hey man, you know we go way back. You know I wouldn't rip you off. Frog put me in a position where I had to bust his head, as much to send a message to the other folks on the street as to punish him. If word got around that one person got away with running a Murphy, everybody would try and not be out of business in no time. That's the nature of the drug game. Everybody is looking to get a free high, trying to steal drugs, ripping off drug money, or all of the above. Dope heads dumb enough to let their apartment be used as a get high spot often learn the hard way. Often while everybody's getting high, somebody in that group scooping the furniture and appliances and checking out the locks. A few days later, the host come home and he has echo in his house as hollow as the Grand Canyon. The place is empty, and he knows that one of the 10 people he entertained and got high with made the hit. I knew that I had to fuck Frog up, and I was going to keep dealing, but we had grown up together from junior high. I couldn't just erase the fun times and camaraderie over $100 debt. So against my better judgment, I let it slide, hoping I wouldn't regret it. Eventually, I gave up selling reefer, dumped Frog, and tried selling chemical drugs, orange sunshine, mescaline, window pane, excuse me, purple microdots, quaaludes that were easier to unload. Shell Shock's older brother, Ton, who was at college on football scholarship, shipped home large quantities of quaaludes from Kansas, where he got them cheap. He was breaking Russian records in college, but he was still a thug. I had paid him $1 for a hit for the quaaludes and sold them on the block for $3 each. That went okay, but I had to unload thousands of those things to make any real cash. That turned out to be a bummer too. I finally had to admit that I lacked the discipline to be a good dealer. Dealing drugs is harder than any job I've had then or since. To this day, I laugh when I hear folks, drug dealers are lazy people who don't want to work. There's no more job more demanding than dealing drugs. He ain't lying. It's the only thing I really tried hard to do and failed at. I ain't failed. I quit because it do require too much time. I prefer to do drugs more than sell them. Drugs help me get away from it all and escape the pain and confusion I felt inside. But sometimes it seemed the drugs were doing me instead of me doing them. Sometimes I had some really bad trips. Sometimes I trip out somewhere in public and damn near lose control. I get so high sometimes. Well, if I say sometimes one more time and stay ripped for so long, sometimes as much as 8 hours, then I get down on my knees and pray to God to bring me down. The craziest part about tripping on acid was the hallucinations. Actually, they were comical at times. Like the night I was driving down the road with Liz and some other folks were tripping on acid. I pulled into the parking lot on Victory Boulevard to take a leak. I walked over and started pissing on the side of a bus tire. Right before my eyes, the bus started melting. It was wild. It was as if the piss was so hot that it burned the bus to a crisp. It melted into one massive glob of steel and rubber. I finished leaking and ran back to the car. Did you see that bus melt? When everybody assured me that the bus was still intact, I realized I was tripping. That acid would do that to you. You can be talking to somebody while tripping on acid and their whole face will become distorted, like large and rubbery looking, like a Halloween mask. Or something somebody would say, it could be something simple and innocent, will be received in a different way than it was intended. I get paranoid and ask the person, what the fuck you mean by that? I found out through trips that your reaction to certain drugs is largely a function of your state of mind at the time. Since my state of mind got to be pretty messed up with the passage of time, I had some bad trips that almost cost me plenty. One night, Liz and I were in a hotel room we'd rented for a small party. Strobe light were flashing and the music was pumping. We dropped some acid. Monroe was there in the playpen. He started crying. I went over to pick him up and tried to calm him, but he wouldn't stop. He kept crying. It seemed that his mouth opened wider and wider. It got so wide that it looked like the mouth of a whale. I soothed and sang and rocked him. I tried everything I could to think of to try to calm him down. But he kept crying, and the wails, the music, the flashing lights were coming at me at once. Then I started tripping. Why won't he stop crying? Why won't he shut the fuck up? Then it got worse. Thanks for the rose, Liberty. KOS. Hmm. Then it got worse. I guess all my resentment resurfaced and all that pent up anger I felt about everything gave in to the drug. And suddenly I turned cold on my own son. Something inside of me said, I bet if you slam his head against that wall, he'll shut the hell up. Go on, sling his little ass. He kept crying as I stood there holding him, listening to that sinister voice inside my head and trying to decide whether or not to obey. His logic ruled the moment. I wanted him to shut up and he wouldn't. So there I was, the only thing left to do. I felt my arms raising Monroe higher and higher. Reflections from the strobe light flashing red, green, blue were bouncing off the wall and the music was loud. I raised Monroe, looked at the wall, and a voice said, Go on, slam him. I could feel myself about to give in to the urge. Go on, do it, do it. Then someone grabbed my arm. It was Liz. She stood beside me, calmly reached for Monroe and took him away. My temperament got worse with time, so much so that I got into beef with my main man, Bimbo. He returned home from the army like the rest of us, wasn't doing much of anything with his time. For a strange reason, he crossed me. He told Liz I went to see another babe. It was true, but he was supposed to be my boy. Stick partners don't do that. Liz confronted me and asked me if it was true. I lied harder than a white man and swore up and down. Bimbo didn't know what he was talking about. I think she knew I was talking outside of my face, but she wanted to believe me. It was part of her own denial about how crazy life was getting for the both of us. Meanwhile, I put the word out on the street that I was looking for Bimbo. I decided that I was going to bust him up. Bimbo was much bigger and stronger than me. I knew I probably couldn't beat him in the heads up rumble. I'd have to bum rush him, pounce on him, and beat him with a stick or something without giving him a chance to recover. Sitting at home one day, I looked out the front window and saw Bimbo's green Monte Carlo pull up in front of the house. Frog Dickie was riding shotgun. This was my chance. I rushed into my room, grabbed a walking stick, and went outdoors to meet him. When we met in the street, I pointed the cane at Bimbo and said, You ain't shit. He tried to look surprised. What you talking about, man? You know what I'm talking about, nigga. Then I raised the cane and cracked him over his head. Whack. Bimbo fell against the car, but before he could stand up straight, I lunged at him, busting him in the head with the remaining half of the cane. Blood squirted everywhere. My mother, who must have been watching from the window, came out front door screaming, Nathan, stop that, somebody stop him. Frog, who had been standing nearby when the fight started, hung back and stayed away, a shocked expression on his face. Desperate, my mother telephoned Greg's father across the street. He came running outside and reached for the cane. I looked at him, pointed the cane and warned, Mrs. Sonny, don't you try to take the stick from me. He backed off and tried to reason, Nathan, give me the cane. You know you don't want to do that. Bimbo took advantage of the distraction and stumbled to his car. He climbed inside and locked the doors. His head was bleeding badly. When I couldn't get the door unlocked, I started whacking his car, hitting the windshield, the hood, kicking the tires. In the background, I heard my mother screaming, Call the police, that boy's gone crazy. Call the police. Lost in what I was doing, I kept whacking Bimbo's car with the cane. I whacked and whacked until he started the engine and drove away. All right, we'll stop there. That's a good spot. Thanks for the likes. I appreciate you. We had a good night tonight, man. Um, so I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Um, hope to see you Tuesday. I don't know what we're gonna do Tuesday. I know we're still on emotional intelligence. And we'll probably talk a little bit about that and a little freestyle. I want a random person to want to do an energy reading. I want to see how lit that is. So I'll put that out in the atmosphere. That's gonna come soon. So hope to see you Tuesday. If I don't see you Tuesday, I look forward to having you back here on Thursday with the book club. Um, Family, enjoy the rest of your evening. Peace.